Now we want to get some more discussion. I'm pleased to be joined by our current affairs commentator, Mr. Li Yong, and political economist, David Mahan. Great to have you both, gentlemen, on our program. So why don't we begin with you, Mr. Li? Tensions have intensified in recent years, especially under the Trump administration. Trade and strategic competition are, of course, among the key areas of contention. Do you think that the two sides can eventually work out these differences?
I think we are on the way. And for example, the trade issue, the U.S. is considering lifting the tariffs being imposed on Chinese products. And there are rounds of discussions about the implementation of phase one. So there are some sort of positive development into that. In terms of a strategic competition, I like to say, including this virtual meeting, the two sides are trying to establish a kind of consensus in terms of the two countries, how the two countries are supposed to compete with each other. And the general direction is, at least from the Chinese point of view, is that we should develop a healthy and a fair competition and try to avoid the vicious competition, and we should maintain virtuous competition. I think that is the key, and we are still on the way of building that kind of a consensus in the future.
Yeah, and two words really stand out. Let's get the thoughts from Mr. Mahan. China has repeatedly said that the U.S. should treat China equally with respect. How do you see that statement?
Repeat the question, please. The sound isn't very good.
Well, two words stood out. That is, the U.S. should treat China equally and with respect. What do you think that means?
Well, I think that is an obvious thing, that all countries want to be treated with respect, and it should expect to be so. I think the trouble is that on the surface, while Biden's comments and the fact that he had the call at all is a good sign, but I think the underlying problems are very deep. America's losing its influence in the world. America's afraid that this will continue. Its economy is weak, and it's had massive failures in the Middle East, the most recent being Afghanistan. So it's trying to talk to China as if it still ran the world and all the rules in the world were based on American principles. They're not. The world has changed profoundly, and I think it was a very interesting summit in one sense, or conversation, because China is in a position of power and doesn't need to do much except treat the world cordially and with courtesy. But fundamentally, Xi Jinping's position is very strong. There's nothing America can do to really undermine China. And even the Taiwan question, Taiwan is a pawn in a much bigger game. It's not going anywhere. And frankly, America has very little leverage, no matter how much it tries to refer to using Taiwan or it playing a role in Taiwan's future. So I think a lot of this was quite hollow. But in the end, business and economics will prevail. And I think there will be some stability from the fact that the two countries are deeply linked economically. And that'll be the thing that in the end starts to settle down what is a very tense situation.
Yeah, China doesn't see bilateral relations as a zero-sum game. One side's loss is not the other side's gain. So, Mr. Li, President Xi also said that the two countries should respect each other, coexist in peace, and pursue win-win cooperation. How do you assess these 3 points? Do you think they are echoed by the U.S. side?
I think this is an important point made by China, and I think the U.S. is taking it because for example, mutual respect is really important, and the previous, for example, previous position of strength, I think, is not a good starting point. And looking at the relationship from condescending perspective is not really going to work in terms of resolving, for example, the issues that remain between the two countries. And this is really about how we see each other. And the second one, I think, is the peaceful coexistence. And the U.S. has clearly expressed that they are not pursuing conflict. And peace is the most important factor, as a matter of fact, in terms of maintaining a healthy and sustaining relationship between the two countries. And lastly, the win-win cooperation is really the way that the two countries moving forward should work together. Should really pursue that objective, because whatever zero-sum game is not really going to help the any side of it, to really benefit. I think this is really a three principle.
Well, it seems that we have a technical difficulty there, but let me get the thoughts from you, Mr. Mahan. Biden called for joint efforts in responding to global challenges like the pandemic and climate change, and these are, of course, common challenges facing China and the United States and the world, of course, and so that they have a common goal to fight these challenges. So we also know that the countries have issued a joint statement at the COP26 climate talks aimed at cutting emissions. What else can they do to further their cooperation?
I think there's a lot they can do. For a long time, both American and Chinese institutions were very closely linked. Universities, think tanks, scientific organizations. So there's a long history of deep relationship there. Unfortunately, Washington, partly under Obama, but certainly under Trump, has managed to disrupt a lot of this. So if Biden really wants to do something concrete, it's to re-engage with China in the best way it possibly can, rather than this general principle of decoupling. Because a re-engagement means that, yes, both these two great countries can do a great deal in terms of mitigating carbon emissions, damage to the environment, and certainly fighting COVID, but also the diseases to come. And a real unity between the two countries is something that we all need. But unfortunately, there's been such polarity, particularly in the last few years, and Biden has done little to rescind the Trump positions that he inherited. He could have cut the tariffs back, he could have had a much more conciliatory approach to China, but he hasn't done that. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on the American side still to make sure that there is the kind of dialogue that they can manage these crises, or these big issues that we all face.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for your analysis, Mr. David Mahan. I appreciate your time.